way we're doing it is this way. We're on. We're on. Okay, everybody, we're live. All the good people are online. If anybody wants to say hi to everyone, you could. There's a chance to meet all the wonderful people from the online people over here. Okay. We are continuing what we started to learn in Parshas, this extraordinary sikha that the Rebbe said in Parsha Shmois, Tafshin Nun Beis, and even that we skipped last week because whatever the situation with the virus, with the mice. Everybody's okay. Everybody's good. I just didn't want to bring any infections. Everybody's like running around with this thing all over the place, but that's okay. In any case, but it's interesting because it's very applicable to this week, the part that we're going to learn today. Because Parshas Boi, the parsha we're learning, Parshas Hashavua, is the actual parsha of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Parshas Boi is Yetzias Mitzrayim, and in this part that we're going to be learning today is going to discuss in very, very, very powerful idea about Yetzias Mitzrayim, about the exodus of Egypt, and how it applies to each and every one of us so strongly. In all time, in all of reality. Okay, so if you remember, just to recap, we spoke about this last week. The question he began with was that the Medrash says that when it says the names of the Yidden when they went down to Mitzrayim, those names are names relating to the redemption. They're called that name. Every name is indicative of the redemption. The question he asked was, if you're talking about going down to Egypt, how do we talk about, what's the relevance, or how are we talking about Geula? What's Geula doing there? Especially not, and as the Medrash lays it out, some of the names are not even talking about the names of the redemption from Mitzrayim, they're talking about the future redemption. So how can one see or talk about when we're just setting foot in Mitzrayim and we're already talking about not just a redemption that was going to happen 210 years later, but we're talking about a redemption that was going to happen close to 4,000 years later. It doesn't make any sense. What? Yeah. So that was the question he asked. The brief explanation he gave was that the descent into Egypt is not one story, and the redemption from Egypt a second story. It's not two different stories. It's not two different programs. But when we look at it from the higher eye, from the deeper eye, from an inner corp space, we see that the very descent of Egypt is the beginning of the ascent. It is one story, it is one reality. And in a sense, there is never really Golus. There is really just a path to Geula. That's the truest element. Not only is the Golus an introduction and to the Geula, but it's actually part of the redemption. And that, as we're going to see, to be able to get that perspective, we have to go very, very deep and very, very high. And the ability to do that is through the leader of the generation. The leader of the generation is able to pick us up so high that we're able to come out of the narrow view, which is a view that that traps us in the here and in the now. And what this does is it liberates us because it connects past, present, and future all together. And when that happens, we're going to find out that the Nakuda of the past, the point of the past and the point of the future, are all unified as an absolute one entity, and the past and the future are fed to us every second in the now. So the now, the past, and the future are really, so that's a real liberation. It's basically lifting us outside of time and space while we're in time and space. And in that sense, it gives us the ability to live Geula all along. So we don't have to be subjugated to the constrictions and the limitations that no matter what kind of constriction, whether it's the physical materials restrictions and subjugations, or it's the darkness of the soul, the spiritual different enslavements and so on and so forth. It's not real. It's not something that we have to bow down to, because we do have the ability via, not ourselves, but via the lifeline that we are given And this lifeline is given to us through the leader of the generation, the Nasi, and that's what the job of a Nasi is, to extend the lifeline to every Jew, to pick each and every one of us up from the constrictions so that they can carry us into the future, or better, bring the future into the now, and uncover how the past redemption and the future redemption, as we're going to see now, are really one point. And even before that, even the initial descent into the exile is really the content of that descent is really the exodus of Mitzrayim. And that exodus and the future exodus are one. So you're really just wrapping all of existence into one powerful point of Geula. That's what it is. Okay, but in order to understand that and appreciate that and to experience that, let's read inside. He began by bringing us another famous part of the Yetzias Mitzrayim discussion, in which we do Pesach by night by the Seder, in which we say it's a Mishnah Masechtas Brachas, in which we say that there's a discussion of when a person has to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. So that we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, the famous statement of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and he says that all my life that I lived, and I'm not so simple. I'm like a 70-year-old man already, so I've kind of lived a lot of my life, and yet, even though he was much younger, but at least he says my experience is that of a 70-year-old man. So I lived really 70 years. In a much shorter time, I had 70 years, and yet I didn't reach the understanding, the appreciation that you can mention Yetzias Mitzrayim by night, until Ben Zayma came along and he darshans it from a pasuk. You should remember the day you went out of Egypt, all the days of your life. The days of your life. It didn't have to say all the days of your life. It says all the days of life. It adds even nights. So during the daytime and the nighttime, which we know is a mitzvah, we say Shema every day, and in the Shema we mention the Exodus going out of Mitzrayim by day and by night. Fine. Then he brings the Chachamim say that when it says Kol Yemei Chayacha, it's not only coming to add the nights. Again, there's a dispute what the Chachamim are saying. Again, we have a dispute in the Mishnah, and then we have a dispute on the dispute, the way it is always in Torah, that everybody's disputing everything. So there is a dispute whether, when it says all the days of their life, it means nights, or maybe all the days of your life come to add the future, the days of Moshiach. That's the Chachamim. But in that itself, there's an argument. Do the Chachamim argue on Ben Zayma, or are they adding? The Sikha is primarily going to flow, even though the Rebbe in his footnotes kind of connects it, even if you'd say it's an argument. But the Sikha primarily is going to follow the idea that the Chachamim are not arguing on Ben Zayma. They agree that we have to say Yetzias Mitzrayim by day and by night. It's just that they're adding on that it also comes to add the days of Mashiach. And that's so the question he asked, and this is what we learned last time, was why was this something? If Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said this on the day that he became the Nasi, which we know this was the day he was appointed, that's what he said. That meant I am like 70 years old, because his wife told him that you're not worthy. They're not going to respect you because you don't have a white beard. They wanted to appoint him as the Nasi, and a miracle happened, right? Yeah, and then the miracle happened, and then he was able to become the Nasi. So he became the Nasi that day, and that's the day that he said this drush. So he says, if this is the teaching that he gave on that day, it would imply, it was the Yud Shvat of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And yeah. So if that's the day, then there must be some connection to his becoming a leader, and that's why he taught this on that day. And other things we have to understand, what's the relationship to the idea that I am like 70 years old? And that's what the questions we learned last week. So I want to read now inside quickly, or we'll skip a little inside, but we'll go through the crux of it. He's going to explain that what is this idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim in general? Why is it so important that we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, and why in these particular 3 times, which are, what are the 3 times? By day, by night, and in the future. So what does this mean? So he says, this Mishnah brings to expression the greatness of the going out of Mitzrayim, the awesomeness of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Again, I'm excited about it this week because this is such a clear idea of what Parshas Bo is. Parshas Bo is the essence of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Even after we left Egypt, it's not something that we once experienced and gone. It's so pivotal, it's so essential, it's so important that it remains with us forever. So much so that even after we left Mitzrayim for thousands of years, we remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. And so much so that it's not just you remember it once in a while. Every day of your life. That's how important it is. By day and by night. That's Ben Zayma's chiddush. That in the days of the night, it's not just every day; it's every section of the day and the night. That means in every possible experience of time, you have to connect to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Secondly, so and also according to the Chachamim, in current day life, that means life during the time of general exile, and also in the future days, which is a whole different experience of time, the experiences of Moshiach. Then too, we're still going to be feeding off Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're still going to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Yetzias Mitzrayim is such a gewaldige thing. You know, when something awesome happens in a person's life, you know, we always meet people, and ourselves as well. Maybe we meet ourselves, and we're excited about something we read, we saw. So how long does it last? Yeah? So if it's a big thing, you talk about it for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks. Then you remember when you meet someone a while later, you talk about it. This is such a gewaldige inyan that we're supposed to talk about it every single day of your life. So that, and not only in this era, but in the era of Moshiach. Okay. What's the reason for that? So he brings first what it says first he's going to explain it more halachically. It's a powerful pillar and foundation in our Jewish faith. That's the words of the chinuch. And the Rebbe explains why is it such a pillar of our faith? Because that's when the opening of the redemption happened. In other words, we at that point became a liberated entity. And no one and nothing in the world can truly trap us, can truly enslave us. We became free people. Now, obviously the question over here is, we went back into Galus and we went back into prison, we were back, and the answer, as the Maral gives, that all the other Galus that happened after Mitzrayim are not in any way compared to the enslavement in Egypt. When we were in Mitzrayim, we were slaves. We were really slaves. We were truly in a state of enslavement to Mitzrayim. Then Hashem revealed, he took us out of Mitzrayim by uncovering that we are his servants, and if we're his servants, we can't be slaves to Mitzrayim. But at Yetzias Mitzrayim, that was not felt, and that was not sensed, and therefore we were true slaves. After that, even if we've gone through various different oppressions, it's more of a circumstantial, external state, but it doesn't really change the essential core nature of the Jewish people. The Jewish people have become forever liberated, and we are free people. There's nothing in the world that can trap us. That's the idea. So it changed us forever. Okay. That's it. Now the Rebbe explains that this is as a people, as it refers to Israel's, the Jewish people's condition in the world. But this is also very personal, on a personal level. Each and every one of us struggle. We all struggle with difficulties. And many times in the midst of these struggles, life and especially the fact that we're spiritual souls, but we're contained in physical bodies, and the physical body places constrictions on our neshama, and that our soul would like to be a certain way, would like to be attached to the Eibishter, and the body kind of says no, and the body puts its boundaries and limitations onto the neshama. So the idea that a yid is a free person means that a person doesn't have to be enslaved to his animal soul, to his body, and so on and so forth. A yid has the power. Doesn't mean that everybody is that way all the time, but you have the power if you choose through Torah and mitzvahs, and through all the teachings of Torah. That's what it is. It's mitzvahs, and it's also teachings of Torah, which give us the insight, the strength, the ability to fight back against the oppression that the body, the animal soul, the Yetzer Hara, and all this want to put on a person. And we were given what it takes. We have what it takes. Sometimes we have to open up our suitcase and look through the various different instruments that we have, that we should be able to actualize this power that we have, not to be enslaved to our material, to our physical condition. and that every single one of us can always achieve a absolute attachment and a connection to the infinite one, blessed is he. And when we become connected to the Eibishter, to the infinite, then we're not slaves anymore, because then we're outside of all boundaries. And that's Yetzias Mitzrayim. And that's what it means to live a life as a Jew. To live in a life of a Jew means to be attached to the Eibishter. The words of the Rebbe, is indicating on the exiting of the soul. The body places restrictions on the neshama, and in general, this world, a person needs to make a living. And sometimes the pressure of earning a living, of making money, can become such a monumental, it can become such an ginormous load that it doesn't allow us to breathe, doesn't allow us anything else. And a Yid can say, you know what, I'm attached to the Eibishter. I don't have to work 23 hours a day. I can cut it down. I will only choose as much as I want to work, as much as I need to. And I'll rely on the Eibishter, and the Eibishter will take care of you. That's one example. You don't have to enslave yourself, and you have it in you. Not every person in the world has that in it, as much as the Jewish people have it in us. We can lift ourselves up, like we find that those people who were Teirasa Yamnase, for example, they didn't have to work for a living. Somehow the Eibishter took care of them. True, when the masses tried doing it, it didn't work. But every person as an individual can make a choice, which means that a person does not have to be enslaved to pranasa. A person doesn't have to be enslaved to all the other forms of enslavement that there are, including the appetites and desires of the body, which pull us away from being the true selves we can be, because the body keeps on pulling us back into the physical need, and we can decide and say, no more slave to you, I don't have to follow. In any case, liskachin, and so number one is you exit the enslavements of the body, and number two, liskachin lisached HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eidei Torah Mitzvos. Through Torah Mitzvos, we unify, we bond with the Eibishter, we bond with God. And Yetzias Mitzrayim made that possible, and it made it possible forever. And since this is very essential to being a Jew, in all aspects of Judaism, it's about you being free to connect to the Eibishter, connect to God, and not be enslaved to anything. So therefore, we need to remember the day we went on Mitzrayim every day of our life. So much so, every generation, every day. And not only do you remember that you went out of Mitzrayim then, but you have to see yourself as if you've gone out of Mitzrayim. That's the point. Okay, that's in general. That's a all-encompassing, sweeping statement that you have to remember Mitzrayim throughout your entire existence, because this is how you can be a good Jew. You can never, ever buy the lie which tells you that you can't, or that you're this, or that you're stuck. A Yid should never, ever accept the idea of being stuck, because Yetzias Mitzrayim unstuck us. Simple words. And if you don't remember that, then how can you keep Torah mitzvahs? If this, I can't because of my mother-in-law, I can't because of my sister-in-law, I can't because of my I can't because of my body, I can't. It can't. And we say you could. Why? Because you're a Yid. So you have to remember. Now, specifically, before that, we didn't have those tools and instruments to connect to God, and at times, certain elements in this world were able to trap a Jew. Yes, and it could trap us because the Abish. What happened by Yetzias Mitzrayim? This is basically what happened. A koyach b'li gvul. What's liberation? How do you get out of any constriction? You need a power that's bigger than the constriction, and the ultimate power that can take you out of every constriction is an infinite power. Now, we're not infinite. Every entity in this world is finite. So we're also finite. So how in the world can we say that a person can always get out of every trap? And the answer is because by Yetzias Mitzrayim, in today's modern terminology, it's easier to appreciate. Hashem downloaded infinity into every single one of us. And when he downloaded that infinite power into every single person, so in any circumstance you are, you can break free. Doesn't mean it happens like this. Doesn't mean it's easy, but you could break free. With willpower, you could do it. And by connecting yourself to the Eibishter and following the methods of Torah. Sometimes the Torah will give you a 10-pronged journey to set yourself free. Sometimes it will be more, but there's always, Torah has something to say to liberate the person from every constriction that there is in their life. Now the details of it is three times the Mishnah mentions. One mention is that you have to do it by day. when it's, what does day mean? Day means when it's lichtik, this godly light. The pashtus, it's when things are going good. So when it's going good, and you're kind of moving through and you're happy and everything is moving nicely in your life, you have to always push yourself to do more. Always don't accept limitations. Don't accept boundaries. That's l'chura what the Rebbe means over here. He doesn't really explain. It's the concept that we're learning now in today's chitas, that the idea of learning 101 times and not be satisfied with 100 times. Because when you learned 100 times, I'm kind of, okay. But pushing yourself out of the boundary. And it's sometimes much harder to get out of boundaries when the boundaries are comfortable. That's the problem. When Yidden are stuck in the Soviet Union, it's easier to cry for Moshiach. But when you're living in a golden Medina and everything is good, and you have Hancock Park mansions and you have a swimming pool and a tennis court in the backyard, what are you lacking? So sometimes, and that's why, in a sense, the Eibishter made it a little easier for us in the last 2 years. We're not asking him to do so, but that's what happened. Because of all the Meshigas that's going on, we're becoming a little uncomfortable in exile, and we're crying out, right? But we've been crying before that too. But in any case, but by day is a little hard. And we're saying daytime, you have to go out of Mitzrayim. But then the noise of Lazar. But there's another one. How about a person that finds himself in a very dark place? And he can say, well, you know what? Yetzias Mitzrayim is a state of liberation. It's a state that is possible for enlightened people. If only I was in yeshiva now, I could go out of Mitzrayim. But I'm not in yeshiva. I'm a businessman. I have circumstances in my life. I'm a family man. I have a wife and children, and circumstances are keeping me in this situation, or whatever hardship and difficulty you have. Or a person says, I sinned already. Not only did I sin, but I got addicted to sin, and I became so enslaved to my Yetzer Hara. And at this point, Yetzias Mitzrayim doesn't speak to me because I've lost my connection to that liberating energy. It left me. I can't access it. So we're saying, no, maskining Yetzias Mitzrayim b'leilos, when it's night. And night, there's 2 times of night. There's night over here, we're in the streets of La Brea. We're talking about physically, it's not so night, because there's a lot of lights. But then you go out in dark forest, and there's not a light. It's really dark. So when you say leilos, probably, it means nights. It means every kind of night, no matter how dark it is, no matter the worst darkness. Like Jews were able to connect to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Even the Jews that were in the cattle cars going to Auschwitz were also above the darkness, as you see so many amazing stories. How some of them just were able to sing and able to bring themselves to a state of joy and a day of connecting to God, even on the most ridiculous, incomprehensible darknesses. And that's the magic of the Jew, that even in hell, they have an access, they have a connection to Mitzrayim. And that's the idea of noises that Chiddush Maskin Tzis Balei, those Kedrashas Ben Zayim, Mapasik Lamantiska, Shem Tzis Mitzrayim, Kol Yemei Chayecha. Kol Yemei Chayecha Lavi Alei, Shafilu Bizman the Leila V'Chayshav. Even when it's night and it's dark, Kisha'or Hashem Enenu Meir, when the light of the Eibishter is not shining. Va'al Dafilu B'Leila Golos, and even when it's a dark night of exile, Yechoyla V'Gam Tzrich Lis Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim needs to be when it's good, and Yetzias Mitzrayim needs to be even when the other extreme, when it's really dark. And here comes the third inyan. It doesn't say, not over here. The Rebbe does actually later say that Ben Zayma had the ability to be able to, even by night, experience whatever. He does mention something, but I forgot. I'll look it up soon. Gimel, the third one. The Chachamim are machadish, have a chiddush, they take it even further. It includes also the days of Mashiach. So let's understand how the Rebbe breaks this down. Very interesting idea, the way he learns it. What does it mean that even in the days of Mashiach, we'll also remember Yetzias Mitzrayim? What's the chiddush? What's the novelty? Okay, so what's the even? Oh, it says like this. Chiddush number 1. Chiddush ba'din d'schiris Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shachir Yetzias Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha, shekol yemei chayecha ba'olam hazeh b'zman hazeh, kol yemei Mashiach. Which means like this, is that there is general states of existence, and we understand that the time of experience of life during this entire thousands of year period is still considered in general one era. Mashiach is a complete different type of existence, a complete different reality. And in that sense, one can question if when you say Yemei Chayecha, the days of your life, is Yemoisa Mashiach included in the days of your life? Yemoisa Mashiach is l'chura a different zone. It's a different zone. It's like living in a different frequency. So there's the now zone and there's the future zone. The first chiddush is the very idea that we connect Yemoisa Mashiach to Olam Hazeh, and that we can call that Yemei Chayecha. In other words, that Yemei Chayecha. Question is when you say your life, how's life? Okay. So what do we mean? Are we including in that life of Yemoisa Mashiach as well? Mechura, the Yemoisa Mashiach is a distant dream. It's a dream. It's a whole different world. No one knows. We don't really know much about it. It's a shrouded mystery, different form of existence. And in a sense, one can argue that that's completely cut off from Yemei Chayecha, from these days that we're living now. It's a different, just like we understand that the life in Gan Eden is a different life. It's not in a body. So too one will argue that Yemoisa Mashiach is a different life. So the Rebbe is saying no. The first chiddush is the chiddush of Maskiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, that when it says Kol Yemei Chayecha, that Yemei Chayecha includes Yemoisa Mashiach. And therefore, Kol Yemei Chayecha ba'olam hazeh koydem Yemoisa Mashiach, and it's all in one chiyuv of Yemei Chayecha. So what does that do? It's basically, what is the Rebbe getting at? What he's getting at is that what the Rebbe is trying to do is that that's what really the whole sikh is all about. The Rebbe is reaching out and trying to grab Yemoisa Mashiach from being a distant reality that's very far away, and the Rebbe is chaining it and linking it up to Yemei Chayecha. That you should know this is one Yemei Chayecha. Yemei Chayecha now and Yemei Chayecha and Yemoisa Mashiach are not two separate lives. As radically different as the experience is going to be, it's still one life. And for that reason, your chiyuv of Yeman Tiska Yemei Chayecha includes also Yemoisa Mashiach. That's chiddush number one, because it's a novelty that Yemoisa Mashiach would be part of your lives. Obviously, when we say Yemei Chayecha here, we're not talking individually to every person. We're talking collectively to the Jewish people that are going to live through all the generations. It's almost like saying B'chol HaDoros. And B'chol HaDoros Kulam, we would think Ad Yemoisa Mashiach, because Yemoisa Mashiach is a different type of Doros. It's a whole different. Dr. Rebbe always says this is the last generation of Golus. It's one form of existence, and there's new Doros Yemoisa Mashiach. But here we're saying that they're one. That's number one. According to that, it has nothing really so much to do with the chiddush of Maskir and Yetzias Mitzrayim, Dafka. In other words, the chiddush is not so much in Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. The chiddush is the very notion that you're pulling Yemoisa Mashiach into Yemei Chayecha. That your Mashiach's days and our days are one continuum. It's all continuing Yemei Chayecha. The second chiddush, and that's what he's adding over here, is that Maskir and Yetzias Mitzrayim. That in Yemoisa Mashiach you will mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is, as the Rebbe says, Afal Pisha Yemoisa Mashiach b'matzav shel geula, lo shayach l'choyre inyan deschiras hageula. What is the point of it? You're supposed to remember geula. Now, if you're living in geula, why do you have to mention geula? If I'm living in darkness, if I'm having a hard time, I want to remember, and I want to, as the Rebbe brings on the bottom, I want to encourage myself. I remember we went out of Mitzrayim, then we'll go out again. But if I'm in Geula itself, what do I have to mention Geula? So L'chur, it doesn't pass to say to mention Geula if I'm in Geula itself. It's like, I'll give you an example. When the Yidden were eating the Korban Pesach, and they were eating like Hillel, they made the sandwich. So when they were eating the sandwich of Korban Pesach, Pesach Matzah and Mother, were they saying also Kain Asa Hillel? They say Kain Asa Hillel, because they were doing it. When you're mentioning what was done, you're doing it. So that's okay. You are Geula. You're living Geula. Why do you have to mention Geula? As if, right? That's the question. So, b'matzah shagula shaykh l'chayre inyan deschiras hagula, to remember the Geula. But that's number one. And to add to that, gam oz yaskiru yetzias Mitzrayim. V'yasei mizu afal pi shagula mitzvah shlemu shaloi be'erech lagulas Mitzrayim. Now, there's another thing. Number one, no matter. It's Geula. When you're a Geula, why do you have to mention Geula? Number two, what kind of geula are we going to be mentioning? We're going to be mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim. What kind of geula are we going to be living then? An infinitely bigger geula. In other words, we're going to be experiencing a grand geula. And we're going to mention a mini geula. How do you mention a mini geula in the midst of an experience of a grand geula? That's his question. Now, why is the future geula a grand geula and our geula only a mini geula? And the Yetzias Mitzrayim is a mini geula. And the answer is for two reasons. Number one, that geula is lasting, and this geula, the geula of Mitzrayim, is not lasting. That's one thing. Number two is that even while it is, not only it didn't last, the fact that it didn't last forever is a sign that even when it is, it's not perfect. Because if it would be a full geula now, then it would last forever. So therefore, the Rebbe says that our geula today, even while is, for example, we're liberated from being enslaved to our Yetzer Hara, but we still have Yetzer Hara. So we have Ra. The point of it is a Yid can rise behind it. He can subdue it. He can fight it. And as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, most people can't rid themselves from their Ra. You can't be a tzaddik. Not everybody can be a tzaddik. Few people can be tzaddik. Most people can be a Beinoni. So on the one hand, you're free because you're not enslaved to your Yetzer Hara, but you still have the Ra. That's what the Alter Rebbe explains was by Yetzias Mitzrayim. The people were like Beinonim. They had Ra, they ran away from it. But in the future redemption, we're going to be so liberated, goodbye to Golus and goodbye to constrictions, that there won't be Yetzer Hara at all. So the Geula is going to be a much greater Geula. So the Chid, but yet we are saying that even then we're going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. So, but then the question is, if that's the case, if by Moshiach it's so much greater and so much more powerful, so why Taka mention Yetzias Mitzrayim? That doesn't make sense. Why at that time would you, even Naniach, we're going to say that there is a certain flow, our days and the future days of Mashiach are kind of one continuum. Fine. But in a state of Geula, why do you have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim? So what's the beer bizah? Yesh leima beer bizah. What's the beer? Very quickly. Begulas Mitzrayim nischadish klolos inyan Geula. Begulas Mitzrayim is when the Eibishter, as I said earlier, the Eibishter then downloaded Geula to the world. And it wasn't just that oomph that he gave by that midnight, that oomph that he gave. He kicked open, when the Eibishter kicked open the door to redeem, he kicked open the door for the Jews going out of Babel as well. The Eibishter kicked open the door by the story of Mordechai and Esther. He kicked open the door for the Chashmonaim when they came and they went into the Beis Hamikdash. He kicked open the door for the Alter Rebbe on Yutes Kislev. He kicked open the door for Yud Beis Tammuz. He kicked open every Geula. He kicked open every Geula that's ever going to be the oomph, the power, and also Mashiach's Geula, the complete Geula, the power and that energy behind it is happened by Yetzias Mitzrayim. Take it even further. Well, it's not a new thing that's going to happen then. This was one Geula, and then a Golus came and overpowered it, and then there's his Chachshus Geula that happens later. It's the same Geula. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim is the psicha. It broke through and enables all the other Geulas to happen. To take it even further, the Rebbe says, not only that, Yetzias Mitzrayim had within it the potency to be the complete Geula. It had the power to be it. And it could have literally, meaning B'koyach, it was the Geula of the future. B'koyach in potential, it was the future Geula. B'poyel mamish, it didn't happen. Because certain things happen. Where do you see that B'koyach, it was already the future Geula? Because the Yidden, you always have to look, the Yidden responded to that Geula. The Eibishter gave them the Geula. How did the Yidden respond? They sang Shira. And what did they sing when they sang Shira? They sang already about Moshiach. Hashem Yimloch Li'olam Vad. And the Rebbe learns it's not stam that they're having a Ruach HaKodesh or what's going to happen future. If it's only going to happen then, why are you singing about it now? The answer is because you already now have that's been given, and you have the potential for that. Because of technical reasons, because certain things got mixed in it, the Yetzias Mitzrayim did not materialize to actualize itself in this world, the Poyel Mamish, as the ultimate Geula. So it was it's almost like Yetzias Mitzrayim, its full power and its full potency was put on standby. It was It's still waiting by the door. And therefore, we talk say that the Frierdiker Rebbe says in the Maimer that all the that your entire condition from when we left Egypt, every single day until Moshiach, is one long Yemei Tzeischam Eretz Mitzrayim. And it's all one force that happened then. If that's the case, so Yetzias Mitzrayim is very much negayah to Yemei Mashiach. First of all, it explains the first Nakuda. Why we would think these are two separate eras. Yemei Chayecha now and Yemei Chayecha then are two realities. In other words, the future Yemei Mashiach world is so cut off. I just got this now when I'm saying this now. I didn't see it earlier in the Sikha. I mean, why is this so negayah? Because here's the point. If not for what he's saying over here, we would argue and we would say, the world of Mashiach has this massive wall that's blocking us from it. And we have no possibility to touch that, to breathe that air, to feel that geula, to connect to that energy, because what is going to transfer us into that world, into Mashiach's world, was not yet released. In other words, it's not even in the cosmos yet. The Eibishter has to do it, and the Eibishter didn't produce that geula yet. But if we say that the geula of Mitzrayim is really that same force, Goyal Rishon, Goyal Achron, Moshe Rabbeinu has that geula, the Psichas HaGeula, the Vayibach Tzia Laila, the breaking of the shackles of Mitzrayim was the full breaking of all. Comes out that really we're not. The power of the future geula just didn't materialize, but it's here in potential. It's here in power. So our lives now post Yetzias Mitzrayim and our lives post Mashiach are really one Inyan, because the koyach that's producing them both are here. It's two phases, so to speak, in one Inyan. That explains why in general you can say Yemei Chayecha includes Olam Hazeh, includes Yemei Mashiach, because you're not so far from it, because it's not a new Inyan that has to happen. It's not like a new creation. Like say there's this creation and there's a new Olam the Eibishter has to create. Doesn't have to create that later. It was created earlier. That's number one. And that's why Yetzias Mitzrayim will be Yemei Mashiach. Number two, when we will be in Yemei Mashiach, we will mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now we'll understand why. Yes. Now we go to the second question. What do you have to say it? You're in a much greater geula. Yeah, you're in a much greater geula. But what is the geula, that greater geula? It's Yetzias Mitzrayim. In other words, it's just, Yetzias Mitzrayim is, sometimes you take a pill that has it's called time release. It's one pill, you swallow the pill once, and it releases its thing once, and then it releases a second time. I don't know how they make it, but they make it in a way that it has a later. Or you have when they shoot capsules of things, they have it go, and then at a certain point it shoots off another. It's already pre-programmed to shoot off something else, which will. So the Eibishter released one Yetzias Mitzrayim. It now gave off a more chitzoniistic of its, and the pneumius of it is only Mizgal Mashiach. So versteht sich, it's understood without a question. Of course, when Mashiach comes, you're going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, because what is Yetzias Mitzrayim? The pneumius Yetzias Mitzrayim is already Mashiach. It's just the poyol mamish. It didn't unfold yet. It didn't open up yet. So when Mashiach comes, you're gonna have to talk about it. Okay, that's the Nakud. Now, yeah. So, let me just conclude with this last part. The last part. As I'm skipping and going to Sivav, I want to read this inside. Here is where the Chachamim are coming and adding a Chiddush to Ben. That even that Metzias Mitzrayim can reach you even Baleilois, Balela Golas, Mechatchim Chachamim, the Chachamim are Mechadish. So it's a whole twist on it. Not that Pashtus, what are you learning now? Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's giving you the Maila of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim is so powerful. It's so strong that what is it doing? It's so powerful, it's so strong. That whether you're by day, whether you're by night, and even far out in Yemei Mashiach, when you're going to be soaring into the highest levels, you're still the power of Mitzrayim is still carrying you. It's still that energy. It's still pushing you. You're still riding the fuel that was released, the was carrying you. Okay, that's Yetzias Mitzrayim. But the Rebbe is now twisting it the other way. If that's the case, comes out again that Yemoisa Mashiach is not so far from us. Yemoisa Mashiach is not so far from us. Because if Yetzias Mitzrayim and Yemoisa Mashiach is one Inyan, so what does that give you? Come the Chachamim. And the Chachamim say, so just like you can tap Yetzias Mitzrayim now, you can now tap Yemoisa Mashiach. Lahavi Yemoisa Mashiach doesn't only mean that when Yemoisa Mashiach will come, we're going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. It doesn't only mean that when Mashiach comes, you're going to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. It also means that now, when you're Balayla, and even when you're Balayla, not only can you take chizuk and strength from Yetzias Mitzrayim, but you can actually draw Yemoisa Mashiach as well. Because Yemoisa Mashiach is not a different reality. You know what I'm saying? In other words, just like we're saying that Yetzias Mitzrayim extends into Yemoisa Mashiach, so Yemoisa Mashiach then extends back to Yetzias Mitzrayim. So now we've created this cross energy, if you might say, a Ratzai V'shuv, from Yetzias Mitzrayim to Yemoisa Mashiach, and Yemoisa Mashiach is traced back to its Shoydish Makar and Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Pnimius is Yemoisa Mashiach. Yemoisa Mashiach, the Pnimius. Yetzias Mitzrayim, B'koyach, let me put it this way. Yetzias Mitzrayim, B'koyach. Its potential is the light of Mashiach, even though it wasn't actualized. Yemoisa Mashiach, even though it's so grandeur, its nucleus is Yetzias Mitzrayim. What you basically created over here is a link between our past and our future as one Nekuda. If that's the case, everything that's in the middle is sandwiched between Yetzias Mitzrayim and between these two energies, where these two energies are really this one energy. And it's not an energy that goes on top of us. It's an energy that goes through us, through every moment of time and space. And because of that reason, when you open yourself up to Yetzias Mitzrayim, you're not only opening yourself up to Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is a partial geula, you're opening yourself, your neshama up, your experience up to Yemoisa Mashiach, which is the ultimate geula. And that means that a yid can feed his neshama from these two fountains of light, fountains of liberation, fountains of freedom, from two ends, and these two inyanim, you can access that all the time. And that's the idea of lahavi li'yemoisa Mashiach, to bring li'yemoisa Mashiach into Zman Hazeh, into the current situation, at the words of the Rebbe. Even dark days, Yeshna noisev ala darga de Yetzias Mitzrayim, Gama darga shel Yetzias Mitzrayim kefi shehi la'mitasa Yemoisa Mashiach. Hagula shleima she'ein achrei gods. And that's the meaning of lahavi Yemoisa Mashiach. Lahavi means to bring Yemoisa Mashiach. If this is what Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah darshaned, the Rebbe explains why did he darshan this? Because now that he's becoming a Nasi, that's the job of a Rebbe. What does it mean to become a Nasi? To become the leader of the Jewish people? The leader of the Jewish people is the person who comes and can liberate and can take you out, can pick you up, give you the koiches for you to pick yourself up. And therefore, Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, the real koyach for a yid to come out of all mitzarim and gevulim is from these 2 points of the past and the future. So Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah is saying this drush and connecting it. It's almost like what we have over here is a triangle, right? We have over here a triangle. We have Yetzias Mitzrayim, we have Moshiach, and we have Zman Hazeh, Baleilos, darkness. And from the two points, which you, in order for these 2 points, however, before Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah came, these are 2 infinite separate points which don't have any connection between them. Comes Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah and through this Mishnah on the day of the Nasi, and he connects Yetzias Mitzrayim with Yemoisa Mashiach. And if that's the case, it becomes one powerful force of electricity that's running from then to here. And as a result of that, what he does is he extends it down to the person who's Baleilos. In the midst of the darkness, even like in the middle of days, when you were so far from him, even then, you have the 2, literally. Yeah, but he's the one who brings you up to Chachamim as well. He didn't dash the first one either. He said, And Chachamim Oimrim is also part of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is giving you both Ben Zoyma. And when he tells you Ben Zoyma and when he tells you Yemaisa Mashiach, really doing is he's giving you the two farthest separate extremes. What is the lowest Shebelow possible? The lowest Shebelow is Balaylas. That's night. What is the highest Shebahai? Yetzias Mitzrayim is high. But what is the high of the high? Mashiach. And what he's doing is he's between these two drushim, he's connecting the lowest of the low to Yemoisa Mashiach via Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim is in the past, and it's the empowerment for the future. And as a result of that, it pervades the entire space in between. And that's why the Rebbe says, his name is Elazar ben Azariah, Kael Ezer is the power that the Eibishter gives Ezer. The Eibishter comes to help every Yid through the Nasi. And Azariah, Ezer Ka, name as Ezer. That's the idea of a Nasi. What? Who? The mother and the matzah. You say it's a